Clement Atlee, Rab Butler, Michael Heseltine, Nick Clegg. What do these men have in common? They have all occupied the office of Deputy Prime Minister in some form or another, which in itself is a very broad and hard term to define. In the last video, I explained why there is no exact equivalent of Vice President in the UK, and instead there is the office of Deputy Prime Minister, which is not always in use, and it's only given at the Prime Minister's discretion. In part 2, we will explore why a Deputy Prime Minister may sometimes be needed and what they actually do. The office of Deputy Prime Minister was formally created in 1995 for Michael Heseltine under Prime Minister John Major, but before that the office had existed in a sort of legal limbo, with some members of the government being given the informal title while carrying no legal regulations to govern what the job actually entailed. In fact, even today, the position carries no salary and has no official residence. The first person to be given the somewhat unofficial title of Deputy Prime Minister was Clement Atlee, who served as deputy for Winston Churchill during World War II from 1942. The reason why the office of Deputy Prime Minister didn't exist for so long, and why it was so hard to formalise into law, was due to the complications of the British political system and the monarchy. Because according to long-standing British convention, only the monarch can appoint someone to serve as Prime Minister, and for the longest time the monarchs feared that allowing the Prime Minister to appoint a Deputy Prime Minister, and perhaps their likely successor, would take away this power from the monarch. In fact, in case of nuclear war, government planning always stresses that the monarch must be evacuated so that if need be, they can appoint a new Prime Minister to maintain the chain of command. As a compromise, the Prime Minister can appoint their own deputy, but the Deputy Prime Minister does not enjoy any right of succession should the Prime Minister be removed from office or die. In fact, there are no rules governing who should step in temporarily should a Prime Minister die, since a Prime Minister hasn't died in office since Lord Palmerston in 1865. Because in the UK, unlike in the US, it is much more common for a Prime Minister to resign or be forced from office. For example, of the 15 Prime Ministers since World War II, 7 have resigned the office instead of losing it in a general election. The party in power then elects another leader from amongst their own number to become the new Prime Minister. But again, the Deputy Prime Minister enjoys no right of succession and so has to fight in a leadership election just like any other candidate. And if the Prime Minister resigns due to political instability or scandal, the Deputy is unlikely to succeed them due to their perceived closeness to the previous administration. The one time that even an unofficial Deputy Prime Minister could be considered to have succeeded the Prime Minister who appointed them was when Anthony Eden succeeded Churchill in 1955, when he resigned for health reasons. Since a Deputy Prime Minister cannot automatically succeed a Prime Minister, their job is simply to be that, a deputy, filling in for the Prime Minister in Parliament or in Cabinet meetings when the Prime Minister is unable to attend if they are abroad or indisposed. But how does the Prime Minister choose who will be their deputy? The Labour Party, unlike the Conservatives, has an elected position of Deputy Leader of the party. The person holding this office, if Labour are in power, often acts as a de facto Deputy Prime Minister, and were seen by many at the time, such as George Brown under Harold Wilson and Michael Foot under James Callaghan. The one time these roles were officially combined was from 1997 to 2007 with Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott. Other than that, the Prime Minister may also have a Deputy Prime Minister on the rare occasion there is a coalition government. Again, because of Britain's first past the post voting system, coalition governments are quite rare, but when they do happen, the second largest party in the government will be given control of some of the ministries of government, with the office of Deputy Prime Minister being given to the leader of the second largest party, so that the parties both have some share of power in government, as was the case with Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg from 2010 to 2015. Another more unusual case was in World War II, when basically all parties joined together to form a single united government for the duration of the war, with Clement Atlee, the leader of the Labour Party, being designated as Deputy Prime Minister to show that Labour was an equal partner in the government, and other parties being given some ministerial positions, with no elections being held for the duration of the war. This meant that the Parliament elected in 1935 continued to rule uninterrupted for 10 years. But again, the Deputy Prime Minister does not have the right to succession to the office should the current Prime Minister die, and in fact, Winston Churchill left secret and explicit instructions to the King that if he should die in office, as he nearly did in 1943 from pneumonia, the King should send for Anthony Eden to replace him, not Atlee. Before the office of Deputy Prime Minister existed, some Prime Ministers would make the leader of the second largest party in the coalition Lord President of the Council. such as Conservative Stanley Baldwin from 1931 to 35 under Labour Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald. Lord President of the Council refers to the Privy Council, the body that, officially, gives advice to the monarch. This office has little function in the modern world, and most of its responsibilities have been taken over by the official cabinet. However, the office of Lord President of the Council still holds cabinet rank and attends meetings of cabinet. In effect, the office is just a nice placeholder for anyone the Prime Minister wants to have on their top team without giving them a single defined responsibility. As such, the person given this role can be anyone the Prime Minister wants in their inner circle. Some people given the office in this way, and were clearly seen as the number 2 in government, include Herbert Morrison from 1945 to 51 and William Whitelaw under Margaret Thatcher from 83 to 87. Although now, this title is typically combined with that of Deputy Prime Minister. The main reason that Prime Ministers will officially designate someone to act as Deputy Prime Minister is to have someone act as their official second-in-command, or to balance out the different political ideologies or wings of their own party.
Look, John Prescott spent all his time basically negotiating between two individuals who were at war with each other. It was Gordon Brown and Tony Blair.
Well, at least you're one of the individuals at war. You've just got Mr. Cameron.
I don't think he needed very many special advisors. He probably just had to make lots of cups of tea to try and create peace between the two men. I have to try and make sure that the two parties govern together in the national interest across every single area of policy across government.
Former Deputy Prime Minister Michael Heseltine put it best, describing the office as what you make of it. Of course, the more cynical reason that a Prime Minister might promote someone to the office of Deputy Prime Minister is to give someone the feeling that they are being promoted so they won't cause trouble disagreeing with the Prime Minister and dividing the party, whilst actually decreasing the amount of power and responsibility they have. And so, the office has sometimes been called simply an ego manager to keep ministers in line. This was seen as the case with Rab Butler under Harold Macmillan, although this was before the office of Deputy Prime Minister was created, so instead he was made First Secretary of State. Another position that carries no actual definitive responsibilities and should not be confused with a much more influential American position of the same name. The office of Deputy Prime Minister and its role in the British government has attracted greater interest in recent years. In 2020, during the COVID crisis, Prime Minister Boris Johnson was one of the first leaders to contract the virus. On the 27th of March 2020, Boris Johnson tested positive, and on the 6th of April, he was in intensive care, unable to perform his duties. During the crisis, Dominic Raab, who was not yet the official Deputy Prime Minister but was First Secretary of State, filled in for Johnson while he was incapacitated, although during this time it was unclear how much authority Dominic Raab actually had, whether he was making decisions on his own or still acting on Boris Johnson's instructions from his hospital bed, creating a lot of uncertainty in the media. This ambiguity has led some to question whether the office of Deputy Prime Minister should be made an official position to be held by someone at all times for emergencies such as these. And indeed, the office has seen much greater use in more recent times. But it remains to be seen whether the office of Deputy Prime Minister will evolve to become a more established and respectable role, or if it will remain one of the many obscure parts of the British political system that are trotted out as needed for political convenience. Although since the UK has so many constitutional irregularities, with hereditary lords existing at the same time as the internet, it's unlikely that we will get a definitive answer anytime soon. I hope you enjoyed this video and thanks for watching. If you want to see more from Newsreel History, remember to like, comment and subscribe to see more content, and I'll see you next time.